let's get started on our grout. Kind of keeping my hand here at the side so that some of this mud, they call it mud, falls close to the edge. And I'm pushing it down tight in between all my cracks, working pretty quickly. I remember as a child, I used to love to make mud pies. So if you like that, you'll like this. Now, if you used broken plates, you're going to want to be careful where you have any sharp edges that could come up, and just go a little bit slow over those areas. And the person that made this tile does have a lot of broken edges that I have to be careful of. It's messy, but it's not so messy that you can't control it. I've actually done this in museums in front of big mosaics like the one we saw in the PowerPoint. And on carts similar to this cart, set up right in the gallery. Wheel the cart in, wheel the cart out. Now you see how I'm pushing that down? If you were really grouting for, say, a kitchen backsplash, you'd probably use something called a float, and you wouldn't have to push it down in so many different directions like this. And we have these big containers of the grout that we've purchased for this class. Probably could do, I'm sure, 10 of these, if not more. So it'll last a long time as long as you keep it well sealed and wrapped up in plastic. This container I've had for more than a year now, and it's still good. You can use gloves if you like. I like to have my hands in it because I like to be able to feel the material. I can't feel it as well through the plastic or through the latex. And here's a little sharp edge over here that I'm trying to just sort of make sure I have the material around it nice and tight. This stepping stone was made, this is a coaster that the person purchased at the Grand Canyon. Now, going to get as much of this off as I can. And start to wipe off the excess. The sides take a little longer to set up, so just let them rest. You can always go back and work on them. You want to start to bring up the middle. You can see how it's kind of falling off on the edge, and I have to keep playing with that. Sponge works good on the edge. This is actually the sponge that comes with the pre-mixed grout. I don't know if you can see here, some of the grout has fallen away. You can just add some right back to it and repair that little corner before it gets hardened. And if it's hardened, you can add this kind of grout right on top of itself. This is a stone that was picked up, and so it's very uneven, whereas the coaster is very smooth. So you might have to spend a little more time. This was picked up on that trip to the Grand Canyon in a hike. So there's the memory of that. And you're not going to have, it's not going to be perfectly even. These are the different heights that we talked about. That's okay. This is a different kind of mosaic and a different kind of tiling than the kind you see in people's bathrooms and people's kitchens. My sponge is very dry at this point. And I'm using that big sponge that I put on your materials list, because now I want to go over and really refine the wiping. I'm not pulling up a lot of material, and you're beginning to see the sand, especially right here. This is a sanded grout. So that'll take a lot of wiping. Going back and hitting my edges. And if you like, you can set up 2 or 3 buckets of water, because the cleaner your water, as you start to get into this final process, the better. Now look. Now the amount of pressure that I'm putting right now is almost like dusting something. I'm hardly applying any pressure at all. I'm just moving that sand into the cracks. I'm hardly getting anything on my sponge. And I'm looking for areas on the sponge that doesn't have material so that I have a cleaner pass. This is still very, see how I can move that here? It's still very soft up here. So I'm going to kind of stay away from that area, let it set up a little bit. This set up faster. A lot of it has to do with the concrete paver that we're working off of. It'll tend to pull the moisture out. And you want to make sure your sponge is really, really dry. Now families, if you're doing this as a family, it's not, you can have mom or dad do the grouting part, let the younger ones maybe put the mud on. I find that children kind of lose their patience with this part, and that's okay. And a lot of our house guests that have come here and made these have gone home and left them set up for us to finish grouting and put into our garden. And then when they come back the next year, they're happy to visit and see how they transform with the grouting process. So for now, I think you have the idea, and I think this will just be something I'll go back to and play with for the rest of the afternoon today, and we'll talk about this in a few minutes. Make sure you have your note-taking paper that was sent with your materials, and you have put your questions into the chat box, and we'll talk about it in a few minutes.